Well, that's my job here, chair. Anyway.
It didn't have as much personality as it did.
But I'm easier to draw in perspective. It's all round. So anyway, where did you grow up?
I grew up, I'm an LA native, one of the 6 in the business. I grew up in South Central, right off of Crenshaw and Slauson. So right where Nipsey Hussle met his final reward. That's like, what, 1, 2, that's like 2.5 blocks from my house. From my mom and dad's house, I should say.
Wow.
So right there.
So what were your parents doing? They were not in the business?
No, not at all. My dad was a mailman for like 25 years probably. And my mom, she didn't work for the first, probably, I don't think my mom worked until I was like 11 or 12, but she became an educational aide at the elementary school we went to, which was right in the neighborhood. So we would just walk to school, like, 8, 9 blocks away, and come back home. So there was no, like I said, there was no connection to the arts. There was no connection to the movie business. There was no connection to even higher education. Neither my mom or dad had been to college. So it was like, Hollywood was, 10 miles away from our house, and it might as well have been on the moon. I thought movies and TV shows, I didn't realize that people had those jobs and made them. It was never anything that I thought that I would be able to do.
Wow. So, let's talk about Eric also, because to talk about your brother a little bit.
Yeah, he's right here. He's my symbiotic twin. Under my, Eric is he's my younger brother. He's about a year and a month younger than me, but he's like a foot taller than me. So I think Mom stopped smoking after she had me or something like that. But,
he's very tall.
Yeah, and Eric is a super talented storyboard artist. It's interesting because he started off as an animator, made a really great animated film, a pencil test of a whole animated film. It's like a few minutes long. It was great, and it got him work as an animator. And around the same time, I had just started getting into storyboarding and live action. So I kind of like seduced him over to live action storyboarding, and then he fell into that. And so it was kind of ironic that years later I went back to animation, and that he kind of went back. So now he kind of like goes back and does both. But Eric likes storyboarding like Titanic and Iron Man and Apollo 13 and just all kinds of stuff. So yeah. He's one of the top storyboard.
He's extraordinary. Right? I mean, yeah, his drawings are just beautiful.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
So were your parents supportive of both of your same passion, I guess? Kind of. I mean, it was. I think to them it was just like a hobby. I don't think they ever thought of it as something that we would do for a living. My mom would just be like, "Oh, they're hiring at the gas company. You should go over there. You should check them out." And I don't think they ever thought of it seriously. It wasn't a reality, for us either. It really was like on the level of a hobby. I think until we were all like practically in our 20s. And like you guys won't get this, but this was before the internet, before Google, before any of that. It was even before movies were really reported on the way they're reported on now, where like we never knew Star Wars 7 made $50 million its opening weekend. They never used to talk about that stuff. That's all like, for us these things just kind of like got beamed from, the planet Mars or something, showed up one day on your movie screen or your TV. So it was like an alien world. It was a whole other thing. And so Mom and Dad, they never discouraged us for sure. They if we wanted a sketchbook or markers or whatever, sure, okay, whatever's, keeping you out of trouble, that's fine, It was just kind of offhanded, and I don't think they had, to this day, almost sometimes, I still don't think they really get what I do sometimes. I mean, I remember, I remember my dad saw something, but he saw, it was so dumb.
I drew, it was his 75th birthday, and I drew this little picture of the whole family and the grandkids and all this stuff. And, it was a little cartoon kind of picture, and colored it in, blah, 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 blah. Gave it to him. And he's like, "Oh, Peter, this is so nice. It's like a professional did it." And I'm like, "Okay, happy birthday." But it's kind of like that, It's just like they didn't have. It's not quite. They get it now. I mean, they've seen me on TV. Shit, they've been interviewed by CNN, So it's like now they're oh yeah, we get it. Oh. But for the longest time, I don't think they connected that it was like actually like a profession that we were doing. Like it was. Yeah, it's just weird.
So what was the trigger? What was the turning point between the moment where you were, kids drawing and loving it and inventing stories to the moment you became professional? What happened?
Yeah, it was weird. I was drawing, and for the longest time, I thought, oh, maybe like I said, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but thought, well, by the time I was in high school, I'd kind of started forming my identity around being able to draw, and thought, well, maybe I'm going to be like a comic book artist, maybe, or maybe I can do book covers like Frank Frazetta or like those guys, or maybe do that. That seems like it's kind of I was a geek, so I was kind of into that stuff, and I was also starting to get interested in movies. But again, there was no thought of that as a profession. But I was just starting to realize, oh, wait a minute, individual directors make these, and they have, different aesthetics. They want to express different things through their movies. I had a couple of friends who were really starting to get into movies, and they would say like Coppola, Scorsese, and I was like, what does that mean? Who are those guys? What is that? And so I was just starting to understand that stuff a little. I got into UCLA like immediately out of high school, so I was 17. I went in as a fine art major, and I was like, okay, great, now I'm really going to learn how to paint and draw, and it's going to be fantastic. I can go do science fiction book covers or whatever I'm going to do. And my first day in my first studio art class, the teacher was, hello, we're going to be teaching this class entirely in photograms. And I was like, what is a photogram? I had no idea, and she was talking about Man Ray and cubist space and all this other stuff, and I like break out into a cold sweat because I'm thinking I'm going to be drawing and have my little easel, and we're going to be painting and doing all this representational stuff, and the program there was like total like conceptual art and like really which stuff I learned later on like what that was and completely embrace and enjoy it and understand it. When I was 17, just coming out of high school, it was like somebody dropped a bomb on me. I really had I felt completely lost. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not an artist after all. What am I going to do? This is terrible. At the same time, though, I'm discovering I'm really enjoying my English lit classes a lot. And there's a creative writing class. There's a class where we're reading like The Great Gatsby and Moby Dick, and I'm really like. And then I start realizing, you know what? I really like comics, and I think what I really like is narrative storytelling through visuals. Because I would try to paint like single images and single canvases or whatever, but it never had the same thrill as like telling a story through pictures. So that was kind of the first inkling, but it's still I dropped out of UCLA a couple of years like. After that, don't do that. Just graduate, finish. I wish I had.
Seriously.
You can mail the check to Peter Ramsey. And so I had a couple of friends who were taking film classes at LA City College. And they were actually starting to make films. And it started to dawn on me that, oh my God, people can, like, real normal people can do this? Is that possible? And when I started realizing that, that's when I started getting interested in film and filmmaking in a serious way, and kind of like decided, I mean, it just kind of clicked because I'd been really into movies. When I would try to draw comics, I'd try to make the comics look like movies, and everything just kind of clicked. Maybe that's what I want to do. I just didn't know I could do it. I didn't know it was possible. And, I had a few friends getting little tiny jobs on the fringes. I got a couple of those little jobs, like painting some stuff on sets and stuff like that. And not too long after that, I found out about storyboarding, which, I think of it now and it's like, well, I had seen storyboards in books and magazines for years. I just never made the connection that I could do it. Found out about an agency that repped people for storyboarding. It was for advertising, but they were also moving into repping people for movies. I signed on with those guys after trying like twice. They rejected me the first time, tried again. And I did advertising boards for a year, and then they got me a movie, and then the jobs just started rolling in.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, now a more philosophical idea. What's your idea of happiness?
Oh my God. I know I've heard some good definitions of happiness before. I think probably being able to do what you want on your own terms without fearing that you're going to hurt anyone or that, okay, that sounded kind of weird, or that, without, without fearing that you're going to cause anyone any pain or that doesn't sound any better. Anyway, or any loss of security, I guess. Something like that. Mm-hmm. No, that's not very complete. It's.
That's okay. We can come back to it. If you
Okay,
want.
so let me think about it. We'll circle back around.
Exactly. What's your favorite word?
Wow. Right now, this second, it's probably ephemeral.
Very good. What's your least favorite word? Right this second.
Least favorite word is probably
We can come back to it.
go back to it. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man.
What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear. Being asked questions I don't know the answers to in front of a bunch of judgmental young people. No, my greatest fear is you know what? I have a pretty big fear of disappointing people. Mm-hmm. How do you like that?
Yeah. That's very good.
Or of like being tortured to death. That's another. That might be the biggest one. No, I think my greatest fear is seeing people that I love hurt. I think that honestly probably is the biggest one.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. What is the trait you most deplore in yourself?
Timidity.
Very good.
I wish I was braver.
Mm-hmm. What is the trait you most deplore in others?
Cruelty.
That aligns very well. Which is the living person you admire most?
Wow. Oh, living person. Oh my God.
I told you it was not going to be easy.
Yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger. No. Let's see. I really admire. Can I pick more than one?
Yeah,
I have to
of course.
pick one. I really admire. I really admire Ava DuVernay. I really admire Greta Thunberg. That's how you say her name in Swedish. I really admire. Who else do I really admire? I really admire Francis Coppola. I really admire him. I really admire my mom and dad. Now, see, there's a long list. It's getting ridiculous, but those are the first ones off the top of my head now. But I know there's other people that I super admire. I would have said Nelson Mandela, but I think he passed away a little bit back. So,
Very good. Which living person you most despise?
that's easy.
Okay, no answer.
I could. Well, everybody. Well, I don't know. Anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that one.
Okay, refer to Twitter. What or who is the greatest love of your life?
Oh, well, my wife Annika, obviously. Yeah, she is. Well, yeah, come on. No, we've been together a long time, and she actually really. I mean, it sounds corny, but she believed in me when I was, just a guy. But if I have to say what is the greatest love of my life? Man, it's probably, I guess it's got to be creating and like, I guess cinema, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels super pretentious to say that, but I've bound up so much of my life, in it and aspiring to it that I guess it's kind of an honest answer. In a way.
Yeah.
Maybe art. Maybe that makes more sense. I don't know.
Yeah. So now another difficult question. What did you consider being a big professional failure in your career, and how did you recover?
Yeah, my movie Rise of the Guardians kind of flopped at the box office when it came out, and but I mean I have it's really weird with that one because there's a lot of people who love that movie and a lot of people who got a lot from it, so it's hard to consider it a failure. And it did really good on video afterwards, so there, but in terms of its initial theatrical showing, oh yeah, it was like a famous epic flop, and that was so in that sense it would have to be that, but like I said, it was so murky, and there's so many. There was still a lot of goodwill toward me, and there are so many things that go into making a movie succeed or fail that. For whatever reason with that one, it was hard for a lot of people to just like, oh yeah, that movie was a piece of crap, so it was terrible. I mean, some people think that, whatever. But, so I only mention that to say, coming back from it, it was like a mixed bag of feelings. So I never felt, weirdly, I didn't feel totally crushed. Mm-hmm. I did wonder, wow, am I ever going to get the chance to do it again? Or, wow, could it have, I know it could have been 10, 15% better. Why couldn't I get it there? So I did have my own, sleepless nights and anxiety about that. But I never, we had a pretty good time making it, and we were all making it with a pretty sincere spirit. Mm-hmm. So I never felt like, it just felt like kind of one of those things, Maybe I'm just in super denial, and I'm a big loser. But there was so much other stuff I wanted to do, and I had, because I had other career setbacks too, mm-hmm. and I had seen other people have them by that time in my career. That it was like, okay, well, if you just don't give up, you can get past it, And sure enough, God bless you. Sure enough. It happened. So it was that was a huge lesson for me, and I had learned it in smaller ways before that. Just if you just don't give up, just like push past the disappointments and hold on and keep going toward what you really feel you should be going toward and what's really pulling you, and you can make it through.
Yeah, because the life as an artist is hard.
Oh yeah,
because you are, you're exposing yourself with your work, and you expose yourself to criticism.
That's
and
right.
you said that your biggest fear was to not disappoint.
I'm telling you.
Which is putting you between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, man.
So, and we all face that as artists.
Oh, yeah.
And we all face stumbling and getting back and continuing anyway, and hard judgment. And
That's right.
so it's your experience is very important
Oh, yeah.
because successes and failures. You've had.
Excuse me? That's right. See, every failure is a brick in the wall of, I don't know, something better. Hopefully.
Exactly.
Unless you're like a bullfighter and you fail, or unless you're like something where you die if you fail, then, well, I guess.
Yeah, then there's no hope. Then there's really no hope. Which is the talent you would most like to have that you don't, because you
That
have
I
many
don't-
already?
Oh, wow. I wish I could, I mean, okay, you're being very kind, but I wish I could be, I wish I could be an amazing swimmer, because I'm a terrible swimmer. If I could be a great swimmer, and then I could learn to surf, I would love to do that. That would be
like your
great.
co-director, Bob.
Yeah, like Bob, he's like an ace surfer. I'm like, oh! I wish I could. It just seems like such a cool thing to be able to do, and to be on the ocean, and it just seems like it would. I mean, okay, Bob's not. I was going to say it would seem like it would make you really mellow. Bob's not very mellow, so that theory is out the window. But that's something I just have never managed to be able to get to do, and then to maybe to really sing really good would be another one.
Very good. What do you consider your greatest achievement at this point? Is it the Oscar or is it something else?
Yeah, it would be. I think I have 3 kids, so I think none of them are dead, and they're all pretty good, kind people that I like. So I think that's the for me that's the biggest one.
Very good. What is your most treasured possession?
That's weird. I'm not a very materialistic person that way. I mean, if I'm thinking practically, it's probably my computer. I mean, there's not too many other things that I would really miss if I actually if I lost all the stuff on my computer and it was really, I couldn't get it back. That would be pretty crushing.
Yeah.
But I can't think of too much else that, I mean, yeah, I got the Oscar, but I mean,
Yeah.
so what?
So talking about
pretty
writing
cool.
on your computer, what are your favorite writers?
Oh, wow, my favorite writers. Okay. Shakespeare. I really like, who would I say? Who are my super favorites? I like James Ellroy a lot. I love James Ellroy. I think David Mamet is an amazing writer. James Baldwin. The playwright Tom Stoppard, I think, is incredible. Who else do I really like as a writer? Oh, there's tons of people, man. I think Akira Kurosawa is a great screenwriter, but he writes his stuff in a team. So, Ingmar Bergman. Oh man, there's zillions of people.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's so many.
Very good. How do you get inspired?
How do I get inspired? I think by seeing great work that other people do. I mean, when you're working on a movie like Spider-Man or like Guardians, and you know how this is, or working with this guy. Every day you're seeing.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, it was a compliment.
Yeah, it was very much a compliment. Didn't sound like it, but it was.
No, it's embarrassing.
When you're working on a movie like that, you're seeing amazing work from people like at the top of their game, every single day. So as hard as some of these things are to make, and they can be very hard, and like it can feel like real drudgery. But the thing that saves you is seeing like this incredible. I mean, like just like the stuff that just that one of the best things to me about being a director is that you're working with people, and if you leave enough room for what you're asking for them to put themselves into it and surprise you with something and give you something better than you would have thought of on your own, that's the best, and that's what kind of inspires you like every day to kind of pick yourself back up and go into it. And yeah, it's just seeing great work. I mean, or not on the job. It's just seeing like, watching a great movie, hearing a great piece of music, any piece of like art or creativity. Hey, this morning I saw this incredible video on Twitter that Barry Jenkins, who's a genius and a god, that he posted. I don't know where he saw it, but it was there was a man and a woman, and they were in a supermarket, and the woman was humming a song by Luther Vandross, if any of you guys know who that is. And then this guy apparently heard her and started singing another Luther song and asked her if she knew it, and he's singing the song, and then she joins in, and they both have voices like I mean, they were like professional singers in the middle of this supermarket, and they just like, they were so happy to be singing to each other, they just totally went for it together, and it was beautiful. And it was just a little video of two people connecting through music, but it just like, I mean, that's inspiring. That's just like, there's hope for humanity. It's just fantastic.
Great.
It's amazing.
I want to see it.
Yeah, it's really great.
When you work on a film or a project or a story, are you inhabited by that at all times? Do you think about it? You dream about it? You wake up and you...
Yeah, kind of. It's funny because it's like, you don't think you are, but you are. And I noticed like when I was working on Guardians for 3 years, because I doodle a lot during meetings and, during everything basically. And all I would doodle on Guardians is like characters from the movie. It was just characters from the movie over and over and over again. And my wife would be like, "Don't you do that enough at home? Don't you get tired of that?" I'm like, "I can't help it. It just keeps coming up." After the movie was over, no more of those guys. On Spider-Man, I can't tell you how many like tens of thousands of Spider-Man pictures I've doodled in ballpoint pen all over my little legal pads, sketch pads. Just like came out. So it's like, I guess there's a disc in your head that's always like, that's always running with that movie on. And if you've ever seen, your schedule when you're directing an animated feature is like, you look at your phone in the morning and you've got your calendar on there, and man, it's like starting from like 8:30 or 9 in the morning up till like 7:30 at night, meetings. And you're like, every minute of your day is typically pretty scheduled, so you're living and breathing the movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't get away.
So do you have a personal methodology to develop a story? Do you close your eyes? Some people, say, I close my eyes and I see the thing. Do you do stuff like that? Or do you have other ways?
It's the.
Is there a Peter method?
No, not really, man. It's just like I don't know. It's just pure blind chance, and it's. Yeah, it's weird because not that I've got that many. I mean, I feel like it's hard to come up with ideas that I want to invest time in, because if you're going to write like a script for something, I guess it depends on how fast you are. But for me, it's like, oh my God, that's gonna be like a year of work to get something decent. So it's hard. It's hard to come up with something that you want to invest that much time in. I'm sure you guys feel like that about, projects or whatever, that it's like, I don't want to waste time on something that I'm not 100% committed to, because it takes a long time. But at least in my experience, it's been really weird things, or weird little it's like a little virus that just kind of gets stuck in your head. That's how it usually happens with me, and I kind of keep thinking about it. And what about that? That might be kind of cool, and if it doesn't go away, if it just persists, then I kind of like realize there's something there, and then, you know, you start jotting things down. And I usually just start by making a lot of notes about, you know, little facets of the idea, and then that starts turning into, well, if it was a story, what would you want to see in that story? What would you want to see the most in that particular story? You know, if I got an idea for this, like a dog who one day can talk, and his master discovers this, and then it's like, God, what kind of scene would you really want to see in that movie or that story, you know? Oh, what about this? There'd have to be a thing where the dog is getting in an argument with somebody else who's pissed off at his owner at the park. I'm just pulling it out of my, you know, butt. But, you know, so it just sorts, a little constellation starts to form on its own, and then kind of working from that. But the initial germ of it, I mean, I wrote a script, and sometimes you get an idea, at least me, I get an idea, you know, years ago, and because I was so busy on like Guardians and Spider-Man, I never had time to really flesh it out until much, much later. Like I was talking to my son one day, when he was, he's probably 8 or 9, my son Nicholas, and I was like, hey, what should I want to think of a new story. What should I write a story about? And he said, you should write a story about a sad ghost. And I went, oh, that's kind of interesting. And it lodged in there, and I started thinking, oh, why would it be sad? And I came up with this thing, but I wasn't able to write it for like 5, 6, 7, probably 8 years after that. So now I have a couple of drafts of that script, and I kind of like it, but it just lodged in there, and it wouldn't go away. And I guess there's whatever there is in an idea that somehow says something to some part of you that feels like it needs to experience that. I guess those are the ideas that feel like they're worth pursuing.
So it's nagging. Very
That's
good.
a long-winded answer. So
No, it's
sorry.
great. It's great. So how would you define originality? You know, there's very often, you know, people saying, yeah, we have to find the thing that's original, you know, make me something I haven't seen before, all that stuff.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the
Interesting.
originality?
I think the minute you do something that genuinely comes from you or your experience, I think it's got a kind of originality, even if it's like a lot like something else. I mean, if, you know, one of you guys took the story of, you know, Oliver Twist and decided to do your own version of it, if you're being true to yourself and you're really, you know, pursuing what you see in that material to its logical conclusion on your own terms, guess what? It's original. It's original to you. So that it's, I mean, there's, where did I read this? I can't remember, but somebody, just the odds of your existence, that there's like your particular combination of DNA and geography and environment and timing and all those things. Every single person is so unique. There's no two people that are like 100% alike. So there's that has, creativity has something to do with that. You know, there's a relationship between those two. So if you can get past the baggage of, you know, whatever medium you're working in, or whatever culture you're working in, or whatever whatever pressures there are that are keeping you from feeling like, from feeling that you can say something that really is authentic to you. If you can get past that stuff, I think that's probably where authenticity is, where originality is. I mean, like, you know, we did a Spider-Man movie. A lot of people think it's really original, but we were pulling all kinds of stuff from comic books and, you know, all these other sources. I mean, it's just a bunch of stuff thrown together. And sometimes, I mean, our movie's kind of like, it's literally like a remix of Spider-Man. And sometimes the originality is in the combination of new elements in the time that they're presented, I think.
Very good. So you
I'm
know.
sorry. I know it's boring. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So
I disappointed someone.
So you work, when we make those movies, one, it's very long, it's 3.5 years. Best case scenario, 2.5. You work with a lot of people as a director. What to you how would you define good leadership as a director with a huge team like that for so long?
How would I define it? I think, I think there's a couple of things. One big one I learned on, I think, Rise was the importance of having a clear vision that you can communicate to everyone, and sort of like kind of making sure that everyone understands what that vision is, like all the time. Because when you're a director, like your number one job is to know the story, because every question that's going to come at you, you should be able to answer in terms of, well, what does that mean to the story? What does that mean to my character? Well, what color are Miles's pants? Well, let's see. And you kind of like, you go into his character in terms of the story, where he is, what his background is, it's endless. But your job is to kind of be able to answer those questions, or at least know, where to look for the answers. So part of it is being able to communicate a vision and not take it for granted that everyone knows as much as you do, Always being clear, always being communicative. I think another thing is letting everyone know, letting everyone have a sense of ownership and investment in the project. That they're not just robots or chess pieces that you're kind of moving around and expecting them to just execute your, you want, at least I like it when people feel like collaborators, that we're actually working together toward a common goal rather than, as much as I might like to just say, just do this, go, and have it done exactly the way I wanted. I actually like much more when someone does something and it's a surprise and it's additive. It's better than what I had originally had in mind or what I asked for. Okay, if it's too different, then I know, I don't think I communicated the vision enough. If you're that off, if this is that off base, I didn't do my job. I didn't, we didn't discuss this enough. I didn't, I fell short. Not this other person necessarily, unless they're just a jerk and they're trying to make their own thing, and it's like, get out of here. But to me, I think it's those two things, and if you get both of those, then I think people generally feel really pretty happy about participating in a project like that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. What's the best advice that was given to you?
Best advice that was given to me.
And did you follow it?
Well, I got some great advice in life from, this is going to sound like a humble brag, Francis Ford Coppola. None of you guys can say that one. I was asking him, because I was working on Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I'd just gotten married like a year before. Is that right? Yeah, I just got married a year before. I was like, oh, Francis, gosh, you got your family doing this and that, and it's, how do you integrate, family with work? And he said a lot of stuff about bringing, I think I really asked him, how do you keep it all together? And he said, marriage works best in the long term. So none of you guys are close to getting married yet. But when you are, trust me, you'll understand what it means. And you won't want to run away and get divorced every time you have an argument. That's basically what he was saying. So that was one. I was trying to think of some good, career advice that I got. Because I know I must have. And I can't, we'll circle back because
we can come back to that too. Yeah. Okay.
I would hate to disappoint you.
No, exactly. That's fine. It's your biggest fear. So, when, okay, the last question of the crazy ones. When you die.
Okay.
Okay, this is serious. When you die and get to the gates of heaven, What would you like to hear
Right.
God say to you?
Let me see. What would I like him to say?
I guess I'd like him to say, "Don't worry, you're not going to be disappointed at all." That would be good. That would be pretty good.
Very good.
That would be pretty good. That would be pretty good. I would hate to like die and get to heaven and then you're like, yeah, it's
Not that
thanks
way.
God. No, it's fine. Thank you. That would be lame.
Very good. So I'm gonna open it to everybody very soon, and you're gonna ask questions to Peter, and we're gonna talk about Spider-Man now because you know this is the thing, this is the movie. So one first question I'm gonna ask just a few. So what is behind the design concept and the aesthetic of the film?
Great question, Guillaume.
That you answered a million times. Right?
Yeah, but it's interesting though, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about the director having to draw on story for the answers to all the questions, because really it kind of came out of the decision to do number one, to do another Spider-Man movie. The big question was, like, when I first heard about it, I was like, really, another one? Why? There's like 80 million of them. But the decision to make the story about Miles Morales rather than Peter Parker also like meant that, okay, you're introducing to, you know, most people in the world a totally different version of this character that people have loved in one form for the past 50 years. So why should they like this version? And what about it is going to be new while preserving the stuff that everybody loves about the character, which is you know, worth preserving? And that became an integral part of the story. So answering those questions kind of determined how we were going to tell the story. And one of the storytelling tools was the look. So it was like, well, how are we going to make this different from all the other Spider-Man movies? Okay, it's animated, but how are we going to make it look different from other animated movies? Because honestly, we were all getting kind of tired of the look of animated movies, and we wanted it to stand out because we're introducing a whole new Spider-Man here. So the idea was, since we're working in animation, let's embrace the aesthetic of the source material, which is comic books, in a way that live action can't do and animation hasn't done for a while. But we kind of thought that would take us back to the feeling, the kind of evoking the feeling that you have when you're reading a comic book. And it's, you know, we thought about it a lot, and the idea that, you know, a comic book is like those panels are drawn by, one artist or, you know, two artists working as one, and they're drawing one image on a page that one person is reading from one perspective. So it's a very intimate and kind of like powerful thing. You're doing it at your own pace. So it's a personal relationship that you have with this medium. So we wanted to see if we could get some of that feeling and some of that like dynamism and immediacy into the movie. So that kind of thinking dictated all the choices that we made about the visuals in the movie. And we really did want it to be different than anything out there. And Phil Lord and Chris Miller were really like, we want to like completely blow people's minds, and like the only note that we want to give is that you guys have gone too far.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you.
So what was different about this project that allowed it to have the freedom of exploration that resulted in that final style and movie overall? Because it's not just
Right.
the image, it's the editing, it's the
Right.
cinematography. There is a lot that goes in it.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I'll go back to Phil and Chris for one, that they were really like, you know, charged up to do something very different. I think I know for Bob and myself, we both, you know, me coming out of live action, I've always had kind of a different sensibility. I didn't come up through the ranks of animation, like TV animation
or Disney. Excuse me. I was always kind of a little bit of an outsider in that whole mix. So my aesthetic sense always came much more from live action filmmaking, and the aesthetic we were going for with this project, it kind of lent itself much more to that. It was kind of, there's a difference, we started realizing there's a difference between kind of the way stories are told tonally in comic books versus the way most mainstream American feature animation is told and presented. So that tonal difference was a good fit for me, and I know it was for Bob too. He's always had just a different sensibility than, you know, I don't think either one of us would fit in like the Disney mold. So I think it was a combination of Phil and Chris wanting to push the envelope, having people on the team whose sensibilities were kind of aligned with that, and having the chance to like just push forward without having to hold back. I think those things kind of contributed all up and down the line.
Very good. So, I'm going to ask one question from actually somebody in the audience. How can we become a director? How did you end up becoming a director? And what are the most important qualities you think for a director?
I think the eligibility period is closed, so nobody else can get in. Sorry.
It's
all over. No. How can you be one? You know what? You kind of just have to say that you are one, I think. You have to make up your mind that's what you really want to do. You have to know story. So if you want to be a director, start studying story, ideally start writing, know story inside and out, you know, from everything about it, dramatic structure, character, all of that stuff, all of it. It will only help you. And that is like the most important thing, ultimately. And then I think studying film, you know, studying movies, film, the grammar of film, studying good films, all kinds of films. If you're an animation student, don't just study animation, study live action filmmaking as well. Film grammar, editing, the language of film, and anything that goes into making film, you should have some kind of acquaintance with and know, just at least know why it's there, you know. Don't limit yourself to one medium or one genre. Be as broad as you can, because you know, you don't want to be a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. One thing on Spider-Verse, you know, everybody said, it's so original, it's so different. Well, we consciously avoided like a lot of animation tropes and a lot of animation, a lot of stylistic things that you see in a lot of other, particularly American feature animation. You know, if something looked too animation-y, we said, nope, get it out of here, it doesn't belong in this movie. And so that would like, you know, push us to look to other references or find other solutions for things. So I would say cast your net nice and wide and have a broad range of influences. Read a lot. And how can you, but practically, how can you get to be one? The best way is to start making films, you know, whether that's animated, whether you're doing your own animated shorts, whether you're doing, you know, shooting movies on your iPhone, which I have to say, if they had all that shit when sorry, pardon my French, if they had all the stuff that you guys have.
You promised.
I know, I disappointed. Oh no, my worst fear.
No, I'm not disappointed. Go for it.
If all that stuff was around when I was like, you know, trying to figure out what to do, man, it's astounding. It's astounding the tools you guys have at your disposal now. So, and I may have never, I may have, but I may not have had to become a storyboard artist, because I was doing that to get a foothold in I was like, I want to be a director. How can I get into the business? I know, I can draw, I'll be a storyboard artist. That was my that was my logical chain. If I could literally make and edit and show my own films, I would have just been doing that until I got really good. And you know, you'll be a bad director for a while, but so what? You're still a director, you know? So just like start making them. It's very valuable to think of yourself that way. So I think those ways, and as far as like getting people to see your work and becoming professional, I think once you start doing it, that starts to, if you don't quit, that starts to take care of itself one way or another in general. I have found.
Are you saying also in a way, don't be afraid of failure, because
Absolutely.
make.
Just
shoot
keep doing
films.
it, keep making it.
Yeah.
Even if you think it's terrible and people laugh at you, you can there's your idea, your supply of ideas is infinite. You're never gonna run out of ideas, even though it seems like it. I think that sometimes, but I know there's more in there. So you can keep going back to the well over and over and over again. You can keep trying. If you try and fail, pick yourself up, try it again. You're going to be a little bit better, even if it's still crappy. It's going to be 10% less crappy. Learn to see the improvements, and be honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses, because that's an important part of it. And maybe you'll discover, I don't really like the directing part. I really like the editing part, though. Maybe you're an editor. What I really like is the designing. That maybe I'm a production designer. I mean, you're going to discover something about yourself one way or the other. So definitely try to get over your feel of failure or being precious. Just throw yourself out there and get into it.
Very good advice. So I'm going to open it to everybody in the room, and because we are also streaming live, we can have also questions from the interwebs.
Yes.
Modern times.
Just to keep this easy and flowing, I'm gonna pick 10 people, and I'm gonna ask you to come and line up here. So if you're on the right side of the auditorium, please walk behind and use the back row to get to this side. And then if we have time for another 10, I'll pick another 10. So I apologize in advance if I don't pick you. And if you have a question, just raise your hand. Okay.
Oh, not that guy. Who will be called?
So we have one question from online. It's from Kenny Valenka, who says, "Hi, Mr. Ramsey. Is there any way to see your storyboard works online, animated or live action? Thank you."
Hello, Henny. Henny?
Kenny.
Kenny? Anyway, whoever you are. You sound like a very nice person. Thanks for calling me Mr. Ramsey. I've put some on Twitter, like every now and then. I just put some Spider-Verse boards up there not too long ago. I've been thinking about putting a couple of actual sequences up, so I will probably do that at some point, because I have a couple from Rise of the Guardians that I would really like to put up. So I think that would be kind of fun for at least the Rise of the Guardians fans to see. I don't know if anybody else cares, but then at some point, I think there's a bunch of boards on the Spider-Verse Blu-ray. I think so. On that alternate, there's a whole alternate cut of the movie that has a ton of storyboards in there, and I did a bunch of those with Miles and Ganke when he was still in the movie. So if you guys have ever seen any of that, then that's where you can see some of those. But it's something that when and if I get the time in the near future, I will probably put some more sequences online. But there's some floating around on the internet. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hey.
I have a question regarding how and if has your professional work affected your personal life in a negative way, and how do you handle that? Especially as a parent, as a husband,
Yeah.
and a person with obligations outside work.
Yeah, I don't. That's hard, because I know. Thank you for the difficult question. I don't know for sure. I mean, we're still all reasonably, happy and mentally healthy, kind of. I don't know.
It's one of those things. I wonder if I had the same job, would my kids be any different, or would they have everybody's got issues and neuroses and whatever else, but it's hard to say. But like nobody's, set anything on fire, or nobody's in jail, nobody has like a giant drug problem or anything like that, so it hasn't gotten too bad. I think I know one area that where my personal life suffered, especially over Spider-Verse. That was like 3 years without a real vacation, and I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again. So that was a huge over demand on personal time. So that's really tough. I mean, other than that, I think by and large, I was very lucky. Working at DreamWorks I was there for like 11 years, and it was a time in my life when my kids were small. And before that, I was in live action, and sometimes I'd have to go on location for, extended periods, and that was kind of tough when you have small kids. But those years at DreamWorks, I was kind of like, hey, commuting back and forth to Glendale. I was in town, so it kind of worked out perfectly that way. So I didn't suffer much there. But during the directing jobs, Guardians and Spider-Verse, that was like a lot more time away from the family, and yeah, I'm sure it had some effect. I don't know exactly what. You have to ask my kids.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
So I have a question about, you mentioned collaboration and vision. And as artists, a lot of us have a story that we want to tell. But, movies are such a huge effort between so many different people. Is there any time that you feel afraid that your vision is getting away from you? Or is that, it's becoming, it's not your own? Is there a way to get over that fear?
Yeah, that's a constant fear. That's a constant anxiety. That's a constant one. I mean, if you're working on a big movie, you're inevitably working with other people, and the studio has to be on board with your movie. So that vision has to be, in one way or another, there's more than just you who have to share in the vision. So it makes it a little easier and a little harder at the same time, I guess, to keep the vision consistent. But as long as if you get your collaborators to sign on, then it's way easier. Like on Spider-Verse, I think from very early on, Phil Lord had written a couple of treatments, and when you read those, you felt like the tone and the emotion and the spirit of that movie right there. So we kind of always had that as like a North Star we could look to, and we knew that if we were doing something that felt like it didn't fit in with that feeling that those treatments created, that we were doing something wrong. So there we had a very clear target. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you can create something early enough where the ideal of the movie is strong enough and cohesive enough, then you don't have to worry as much about not expressing the vision. You're always marching toward that. But yeah, it is an anxiety, but I think that's the answer to it. Figure it out at the beginning. What's the heart of it? Does that make sense?
So my question is regarding the style of the film. With such a unique visual style, how long would you say it took for the visual development team to really nail that down? And compared to other productions you've been on, was it something that was a lot more challenging? Was it something that you found getting into a lot more of a flow to find this happening? Because it's really hard to stand out, especially in like Hollywood these days with a lot of recycled ideas.
Yeah, it literally took, I think, a year and a half. It took a year and a half. Bob and I would joke about it. It took a year and a half to create 5 seconds of 5 seconds of film of like one of our characters looking the way they should look. Because for months we were like, okay, but what does a person standing in daylight look like? What do they? What? We didn't know. We had no idea, and it was interesting because we had some initial viz dev artwork by this guy Alberto Mielgo, who's a genius. He's an insane genius, but he's a genius. And he went out to do Love, Death, and Robots. And Alberto like nailed, like there was something about his like aesthetic that was really contemporary and kind of almost photoreal but stylized. And that was like the germ of the style. But his way of working was couldn't fit in with like, you know, actually producing a movie, unfortunately. So we got this this genius guy, Justin Thompson. Justin is just like an amazing production designer at Sony, and they worked with Phil and Chris before, and he's the one who really took what Alberto had done, but like took a big pole vault in addition, and came up with things like the way we use chromatic aberration, the halftone dots, all these things that were pulled from comics. Justin, he came up with this thing that, you know, if we want to animate on twos, we want a graphic look, we want to get black lines on the characters, we don't want to use motion blur, let's like forget about the idea of photographic depth of field and photographic techniques altogether. Let's base everything on printing techniques. And it was that was kind of like the key that unlocked a lot of the thinking about the look of the movie. So, but to do that, it was a lot easier on the environments and the backgrounds, with all the different rendering and that style. It was very hard to apply to our characters, and it would be like one idea at a time would sort of like, you know, Sony ImageWorks would figure out, oh, they came up with a rig that they could, the artist could rig emotion lines on the characters and they could change it shot to shot. Oh my God, how do you do that? And just little things like that. We figured out, oh, the halftone dots, here's how we can make them so they're not floating on the skin and they're not artifacty, but, you know, it's all these like hundreds and hundreds of hours in digital dailies rooms of like dissecting just the finer points of every single little thing. So it literally was like a year and a half before we felt like, okay, we can start here. If this went up on the screen, none of us would want to jump out a window from embarrassment. And then from there, it honestly, we kept refining and refining and experimenting and refining all through the production of the movie. Because none of us knew what the end of the movie was going to look like when we started at the beginning, even though we were like in the middle of making it. So it was a long road. And that was a long answer, but there you go.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
So I wanted to add a bit of an add-on to the first question, which was how has your work negatively affected you? And so my question would be, how do you balance your work life? And when things start to add up, like huge amounts of things, like for example, for a student, people can get very anxious when lots of classwork starts to pile together. So as a director, like how do you balance that kind of work life, that hectic, schedule? Do you have any like techniques like miracle morning and things like that?
Serial killing. No. No, it's really hard. It's really hard. It's really hard. You have to. Here's one thing with me. I've been in the business a long time, and when I was a storyboard artist in live action, a lot of times I'd be the first guy to get hired with the director. I'd come on like before the production designer sometimes. So I would see like a big like. I would get to see like a lot of the making of the movie, and I worked on a lot of movies, and I would see that, wow, yeah, there's like peaks and valleys and things get hard, and sometimes they go smooth, and wow, sometimes it's really difficult, and oh my God, this person got fired and they changed the whole script and shit. But very few times was I ever on a movie and things got tough and they said, forget it, this is too hard, we're canceling this movie. That never happens. That really never happens. So, and also seeing like, I got to work with a lot of like really big directors, and seeing those guys struggle with things and not know the answers to stuff. Seeing like David Fincher, like, yeah, we're gonna do it this way, and they try it that way and it doesn't work. We're gonna do it that way, and it's like you can see that it's very seldom is like the end of the world. So you start, I guess it's a sense of perspective is what I'm trying to say. So if it ever seems like it's getting too overwhelming and it's getting it's getting, your mental health is really suffering, you got to take a step back and like, well, it's only a movie, or it's only a grade, it's only a test. I'm not going to get executed. I'm not going to get tortured to death, which is my other fear. You can only disappoint yourself, which is my greatest fear. Wait a minute, no. I think having a sense of perspective about where you are and what you're doing is probably the most valuable thing. And just, you just have to tell yourself everything is not, the world's not necessarily going to collapse if you have a stumble or a disappointment or a failure, Just remind yourself of that and know that you have the resilience to pick yourself up and keep going.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Peter.
Hey.
So Mike, you mentioned that the project took 3 years without a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So how long are your breaks in between projects, or are you constantly churning like a new project?
Good question. Hopefully not too long, but hopefully long enough. Hard to say. It was. It all depends. I mean, there's a couple of other things that I think within a couple of months after finishing Spider-Verse that I was asked to come on as an executive producer, which is a different kind of time commitment than a director. And actually, I was asked to come on and direct one of them too, but I was like, that's the last thing I want to do right now. So, but that's me having kind of a little bit of the luxury of a success right behind me that I could pick and choose a little bit. I don't know how long that'll last. There might be, this may get shown to someone, I may have said something super embarrassing and, I could get canceled. Who knows? But, it varies, and a lot of it has to do with, if you have something, what are your own projects? If you have something passionate about yourself that you're pushing. So bottom line, there's always, I'm involved with a few different things right now, and the idea is that you're working on multiple things, and when one of them pops, when it's time, you kind of jump onto that and take off on that and make time for the other ones when you can. Kind of like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Hey, how are you?
So I remember you said that, like, sometimes when you're like someone's directing something, they find out they want to be an editor instead.
Mm-hmm.
For someone who's like interested in like different parts of filmmaking, or like as in like an artist or different genres, is there any advice to like find what you would want to do, or like would the advice be to even choose one thing instead of being like versatile in anything you can do?
I think the only way you can really know if you really like it or not is just to do it, just to try it. And I think right now you guys are in school. I mean, if you're doing projects and if you have a group of people you can start collaborating with, you guys can, do projects and sort of, edit this one, or next time you direct that one, or maybe you're going to there's probably ways that you can like try out the different crafts working with each other on actual projects that you'd kind of be able to start figuring out what it is you wanted to do, I guess. I don't know any other way to figure out what really suits you other than to do it, I would say.
Right.
Unless, some people really know what they want to do, like, for whatever reason, when I started getting, maybe it's an ego thing, I was like, I want to be a director. That was like the first thing I lit on. Because I think it was understanding what that job spoke to something in me. So that's probably another part of it, is really learning what the different crafts are and what they entail.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey there.
Hey.
I was wondering, because you mentioned before that you had times where they would bring you something and you'd be like, oh, we want to be as far from theatrical animation, or like just animation in general, as far as the look of Spider-Verse. There had to have been times where the studio was kind of worried about that, and if they were, and if there was studio interference, how'd you get around that or deal with it?
You know what? They actually weren't.
Wow.
They wanted it to be really different too. And Phil and Chris had such pull at the studio that that they were kind of like, oh yeah, sure, whatever you guys want to do. It was like literally they kind of had a blank check, not necessarily literally in money terms, but creatively, the studio was on board with them going and us going pretty far. So there may have been a couple I think they got a little nervous about Spider-Ham. It was like, oh, but I'll tell you right now, the pig's not going to be in the movie. So that was a little bit of a battle, and then the Kingpin design, that was another one. Oh, I don't know, he looks kind of ridiculous. I'm afraid people are going to laugh at him. So those things, but that was kind of it. Everything else, they were kind of thrilled that it looked as different and as bold as it did. It was exciting to them. So I give them credit for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. My question has to do with the
Hey.
audio portion of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's very memorable. It almost felt like a Tarantino film. Like when I hear certain songs,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think of the scene
Yeah.
that I saw in Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Was that always your vision from the beginning? And how did you find the artist? And
Yeah.
what was that process?
Yeah, we knew, once again, it kind of went back to story. It kind of went back to, wow, why make another Spider-Man movie? Oh, how are we going to get people to like and invest in Miles Morales as a character? And I think our thinking was, if we can make it feel like he's a real contemporary 13-year-old living in the world right now, in Brooklyn, what is he going to be listening to? What kind of music is he going to like? What's his experience of the world going to be through music? And it was like, well, obviously he's going to be a hip hop kid. He's going to be a hip hop fan. That's just the music of now. And it was sort of like, yeah, well, if he was walking around, what's going to be on his playlist? What's he listening to? And that's kind of how we thought about like the needle drop stuff in the movie. And when it came to selecting the artists, it was, we're working with like Sony Music, and, there's some people that they have, and I think Republic Records and some people that they had, but it was all like, well, what would fit in Miles's universe of like, what would be on his phone if you like, stole it and listened to it, what would you be hearing? So that was kind of how we thought about it. And then the actual score that Daniel Pemberton did was, we also wanted that to be, we didn't want it to be like a typical orchestral superhero score, but we wanted it to be able to have that emotion to it. So again, we wanted to take the emotion and the usual feeling of a superhero score, but filter it through Miles's experience. What would he, what aesthetic would his reality bring to it?
Okay. And the scene where he takes the leap of faith.
Yeah.
And that song, "What's Up Danger"?
Yeah.
Did you yourself listen to it over and over? And think,
That's me rapping on that song. No, I'm just kidding. No, here's the funny thing about "What's Up Danger." We kind of picked it, and I was never that crazy about it for whatever reason. I actually, I was never crazy about the dude's voice. He sounds a little whiny to me. But I liked it a lot better when Daniel Pemberton did score to go along with it and beefed it up, and then it fit in with the rest of the movie to me. So to me, that's what ultimately really makes that song like kind of work and pop, was that Daniel found a way to kind of like blend it in with the score and the rest of the movie. So sorry to I'm sorry to disappoint you about my feelings about the song. But all of those songs, we would kind of pass these playlists around. What about this one? And we'd put different songs against different, and I will admit, that song did particularly, lyrically and musically, it did end up fitting that sequence like better than the other choices that we had. But it was a kind of a democratic process. We would all kind of vote on, what we liked best where. But yeah, there was a bunch of stuff floating around.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hey.
My question is, as someone who is trying to get their career started, I look a lot on Instagram, Tumblr, all that,
Mhm.
other artists, and they create such amazing work.
Mhm.
I often get like that, oh, it looks so good. I'm not drawing anything today at all. It makes me want to quit. Have you ever experienced creative block, and how do you get over it?
Yeah, I've had a lot of inferiority complex kind of things, and imposter syndrome. We were just talking about that. But you have to remember, all those people are feeling the exact same thing. They really are, whether you think they are or not. They're experiencing the very same thing. So I think, like I said a little earlier, your supply of ideas is inexhaustible. So just keep churning stuff out, and don't be precious, and give yourself the room to. There's a phrase called negative capability, and that means that is the quality of being able to keep your focus and keep your mental balance, even when things are when you're in very uncertain circumstances. Negative capability. So just remind yourself that, okay, I'm not feeling too hot right now, but you know what? I still got some ideas. I still got some talent. Go look at something really good that you drew the other day, and like, wait a minute, I did that. That's pretty good. If I did it then, I can do it better. I surely know more than I did when I drew that 3 months ago. Whatever you have to do to like psych yourself up, to remind yourself, I did it once, I can do it again, I can get better. Because everybody goes through the same thing. Just remember that every artist who's ever lived has felt exactly like you feel when you feel like you can't do it anymore.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a bit of a two-part question. Sorry for being a bit greedy. But
It's okay.
So I was very curious about like what are the thoughts or ideas that kind of led to the experimentation of like, varying frame rates in different parts of the movies, and also what you kind of really want from the animation, like just film industry and everything in the future.
Wow. Okay. That's a big one. As far as the frame rates, I don't think there's that much varying. I've heard this theory that, well, Miles is animated on 2s and everybody else is animated on 1s because they're better. That's not true. Everybody's on 2s.
Really?
Everybody's on 2s. There may be a couple of instances for technical reasons that a tiny bit of the animation is on 1s. But, Bob Persichetti was like militant about, no, it's all going to be on 2s. So if somebody like snuck in and did some 1s behind his back, then he's probably really pissed off. But,
I see.
But as best as I can determine, that's kind of a myth about the extensive use of 1s for any particular effect. If certain characters look more capable or smoother, they were just animated that way. That's just like pure animating talent going on. And the rest, the second question was about what do I want out of, like, what do I want out of the medium in the future?
Yeah, just like what kind of experimentation do you want to see?
Oh, everything. I mean, literally everything. There were so many different kinds of techniques that we drew on, in Spider-Verse. I mean, we were kind of just taking what the dictates of the story and, in a lot of cases pushing them to their extremes with the look and the techniques that we used. There's no limit to anything, whatever it takes to express what it is you're trying to say or what you feel or what you want to communicate aesthetically or emotionally. There shouldn't be any limit to anything. So really, I want to see everything. I guess the thing I'm most interested in seeing is something that's got some actual human feeling or emotion or thought behind it, rather than gimmickry. Because none of that stuff is worth anything if it's just technology or if it's just a style. If it's expressing something real and human, then it's worthwhile.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If not, we have time for a couple more from the audience.
Yeah, go.
Okay. Okay. Just make it easier. Ask me questions.
If you were to make another movie that combined 2D and 3D aspects, how would you combine it maybe for a more a way that it combines 2D even more into the animation medium?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I don't know if I don't know if I ever think about it like that. But you know, for me, it's so funny because for a long time I didn't know if that was going to work because we didn't know how we were going to do it. And for a long time, like I was explaining before, you know, we were trying to wrap our heads around exactly what it should be. So, because we didn't want it to look like, you know, we didn't want it to look like it was rotoscoped. We were really afraid of that. We didn't, you know, Waking Life is a cool, you know, it's a really cool film, but we didn't want the movie to look or feel like that. So there was a lot of skepticism for a while. I was really kind of like, okay, we'll see what this, you know, dot stuff is going to look like. And for a long time, I was kind of like, and then, you know, it started sort of, you know, we started to nudge it this way and nudge it that way. And it was like, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of cool. That's kind of working. Oh, wait a minute, maybe it can work. So it was such a process that it's hard to say right now that, oh, yeah, I'd like to see 30% more 2D in this 3D movie. It would kind of depend on what the movie was, what the subject matter was. You know, how does that relate to the storytelling or the overall aesthetic or the feeling that you wanted to give? I think you have to take everything in terms of what is the overall impact that you want to have, and then that determines everything else. You're welcome.
How would you describe the transition in your career from storyboarding to film directing, and how would you say that your abilities as a storyboard artist helped you into the live action part of film directing?
I would describe it as slow because it took me forever. And I always felt like it should have been much quicker, but it probably happened in the way it was supposed to happen. But the things about storyboarding that helped me, I think learning, you know, I worked with a lot of different directors, so seeing the way that they thought and kind of learning their, you know, aesthetically, their rhythms and the things that they were concerned with, that helped a lot. Seeing the practical side of the job, because when you're storyboarding in live action, you know, or at least back when I was doing it, there were like real sets. And now there's green screens and all that crap. But there were real sets, and you had to, you know, you would actually think about staging. There were actors who were going to be in a real space, and you had to like, well, how many setups could this, you know, sequence be done in, because you're going to have to be able to shoot in this location. You're only going to be able to be there for a day, so you can only have, you know, X number of times you can switch the camera placements. So they're all like practical things like that were like fascinating to kind of like wrestle with and learn that you had to think about if you were going to be a director. The big thing was economy in storytelling. You learn a lot about editing from being a storyboard artist after you've done it long enough, and you start to, you know, when you're getting a facility with film grammar, you know, like, well, you know, why do I dolly versus panning? You know, why would you want to push in there? Is there a way to take these 2 or 3 separate shots you have and block it so that you can get them all in one camera move, so that you don't have to shoot 3 separate, you know, there's all these things that going through the mental exercise of storyboarding starts to give you an instinct for a kind of economy in storytelling. So I think it's great practice. It's great practice. I mean, you can practice on it yourself. You don't have to be able to draw well, you know. And you can even you know, pause frames and sketch them and like see when the camera cuts and see what kind of move the camera's making. You can teach yourself a ton about camera language and you know, editing, cinematic language, all that stuff. You don't have to be a great artist to learn through storyboarding, but it is a great way to learn.
Oh.
Oh, hey.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello there. So Into the Spider-Verse, I was very, very struck by the visuals of it, but I was also very, very struck by the story, and this very kind of personal, intimate route the story took. And it's not something that I personally feel is seen a lot in animated film. And I was wondering, like, how do you tell a story like that, a story that's so heartfelt, that's almost quiet in, you know, it's this kid who is afraid of failing, so he doesn't try, and it's this man who has tried a long time and it doesn't feel like it's amount to much. How do you tell stories like that?
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears. The story took a long time to evolve. It was you know, I mean, we were very lucky in that we had and a couple like extremely talented writers, Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman, and then you know, and Bob and I also, you know, we kicked in on that. We all kind of collaborated on the story, you know, to a very large extent. So, whoa, how do you do it? I mean, it's a lot of work. You know, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of questions and a lot of discussion and finding out, well, what really is the story about at bottom? What is Miles's real journey? Because for a long time there was Miles's story took a lot of twists and turns, and it was a little tough. We were wrestling with a lot of things with him as far as his motivations for, you know, why he would or wouldn't want to be Spider-Man, you know, or why would that be such a hard thing for him to want to try to live up to, or, you know, because it's like, well, you get bitten by a radioactive spider, you get a bunch of powers, that's kind of cool. Who doesn't want that, you know? But we had to dig and find out, well, why would that be a problem? You know, well, what is it about his journey and his life that's going to make that make sense? So it's like months and months and years of like asking those questions, finding what you think is an answer, trying it out, kind of like beating it up until, you know, it fails, or if you beat it up enough and it doesn't fail, then you go, oh, that's working, and then you build on that. So it's kind of like mountain climbing, I think. You know, you're like always finding the little crack or the little foothold that you can go up a little higher on the idea, and it's you just kind of have to use whatever instinct you have or whatever opportunities you see coming out of the process. You have to use those to kind of keep pulling yourself along. And then it was like there was like I don't know, probably 5-6 of us that were like a creative core, and we would talk it to death and stress test it amongst each other. So it's a tough question to answer, because the process is it involves a lot of debate and a lot of iteration, basically. Yeah, and you know, hey, and knowing your stuff, I guess. You know, you're not talking to an idiot up here. Come on. Hello.
Hi. Like making a movie for a character like Spider-Man, who has over 50 years worth of source material behind him, how does the preparation for that work? How do you go and read like 4 million comic books, or how does that work?
We didn't have to, actually. Most of us were pretty familiar with the character. Like, I've been reading those comic books since I was, 12. So, but when you're talking about, well, what does the character mean? What's the essence of the character, and what are the parts of the mythology that need to be in the movie, and what parts don't need to be in the movie? Those things, and we were like, we've read tons of stuff. There's all the Miles comics. We had to be really familiar with kind of mining,
mining the best stuff from those, or the most useful stuff from those for this particular version of the story. So it's, you kind of try to narrow your focus with an eye toward finding what's essential. You know, what's the, I think the movie kind of sort of proves the strength of the idea of that character, that, you know, anybody who had those powers and, you know, would have to deal with them along with dealing with the stuff in their regular life. And depending on what kind of person they are, they're either going to rise to that challenge and do it on behalf of other people, or, you know, or they're not. So that great power, great responsibility line really, I mean, it really is like a great thing to like build a character and a story around. So it's stuff like that that I think you look for more than like, oh, who is in issue 225, or what power does this guy, you know, it's less about the details and more about the essentials.
I think we have time for one more.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you tell me about some of the challenges you face politically between Sony and Marvel, and how you overcome those challenges?
No comment. No. No, it's weird. On our movie, we did not really have any issues. Yeah, you know, well, maybe there was one issue. We didn't have a lot of interference from Marvel, like, you can't do this and you can't do that. There were a couple of little things. I mean, there was this weird thing where somebody from there called us and said, hey, you can't kill Peter Parker. We're like, well, you guys did it in the comic book. That's why there's a Miles Morales. So that was kind of dumb. But you know, our first version of the movie that we were working on was much more like the original Miles comics, with him and his buddy Ganke, where Ganke was really like his Mr. Watson, was really like his sidekick, helping him to learn about his spider powers. And they were, you know, in the comic they're like best buddies, and I storyboarded a ton of that stuff. We have a bunch of stuff with Ganke and Miles. It was great. We were like, man, even if he never gets the spider powers, if he never becomes Spider-Man in the movie, you could watch a story just about the friendship between these two guys, because it was really good. And then we started hearing about Far From Home, and saw that, you know, the guy that they cast, and we were like, wait a minute. And we were kind of realizing that they kind of basically, I guess they decided that Peter Parker in the live-action movie needed a best buddy in high school, and they kind of, oh, thank you, boom, and kind of put him in there. So we couldn't use him anymore. And we were like, oh. I mean, looking back on it, it's like, okay, if Ganke had still been in the movie the same way, it would have been like a 4-hour movie. So it was eventually, I guess it was all for the best. And I do think we got a more interesting Miles out of it, because that is kind of a lot of the difference between the comic and the comic is much more interior and kind of a little more subtle. The movie, Miles is, because it's just the weight is on him in the first part of the movie, he had to be a more cinematic, kind of slightly bigger character. But other than that, Marvel didn't really interfere with us at all. I think they were just kind of like, oh, yeah, go. This is a little cute thing. Go have your fun. That's all. So that was kind of that.
We're good? Right, Zach, we have time for one more? No? Okay,
Looks
one
like it.
more.
Okay, maybe two. Oh, my God.
I was wondering, oh, hello, what your first movie you ever made was.
What my first movie I ever made?
Yeah, just like.
It probably had G.I. Joes in it and dinosaurs. We used to play. We had a Super 8 camera like way back when I was a kid, and we would do little claymation movies and you know, probably dumb crap like set G.I. Joes on fire or dumb stuff like that. So probably something like that. But other than that, the first movie that I made that was actually like film edited together, I think was a story about a guy. Yeah, it was a story about a guy Oh, what was it? It was he sees a girl and he wants to talk to her, and he fantasizes, and suddenly it cuts to them at the beach, and they're like, having this lovey-dovey romantic time at the beach. And then I can't remember what the twist ending was, because it pops back to real life, and I don't know. I don't know what happened. So sorry I blew it. It was a good setup, but I can't remember the rest. But I think that was the first thing I ever shot and thought up and put together with real film and actual editing and stuff like that. Nothing to write home about. I'm sure you could do way, way better.
Very good. So we're concluding because we're out of time.
Okay.
But what's next for you, Peter? What do you want to do next? I know you have a bunch of stuff cooking.
Well, yeah, I have some things cooking. I'm trying. I've always wanted to get back to live action, because that's where I kind of, always intended to get to before I took my animation detour. But I still want to stay involved in animation, so I want to do both. It really is more about the stories, as long as they're stories with real emotion and some kind of human actual. That's what I think I'm really interested in, is emotion and human interaction and something that's something relatable, something that makes you. Something that gives you, and something that can give you a real cinematic experience. I mean, I really do feel like movies that aren't just talking heads, movies that really are expressive and immerse you in an experience, are something that's just, it's an incredible form, and there's no limit to it. You can there's no limit to the things you can do with filmmaking. So. Yeah, if I could just keep doing that in whatever shape or form, I will be very happy and lucky.
Okay, you won't talk about your project specifically. I'm not going to ask you. Okay, very good. Well, this concludes, this episode of Imaginary Friend. I want to thank Peter, who is not an imaginary friend. He is a friend.
I'm real. Thank you.
And for coming and for answering all those questions.
It's a pleasure.
So big applause for Peter, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. You're too kind. Thank you. Thanks, Guillaume. How about a hand for this guy? He's the greatest. We would kind of say that we really loved Guillaume because he was like a real artist and a real human being at DreamWorks. He just had a warm, he's French, it was like, oh man, wine at lunch, and a real, a real guy, a real artist. So you should treasure him because he's wonderful.
Thank you, Peter. You too.
You're very welcome.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for coming.